The crew of the Enterprise find themselves at the mercy of a socially awkward young passenger with godlike powers in Star Trek the original series' first season, second episode, Charlie X. But what happened? What did I like, and what didn't I like so much? Before I get into this recap and review, please note this video contains spoilers, so if you've not yet seen this episode or any of TOS Season 1, this might not be the video for you. Let's warp into this. The Enterprise rendezvous with the Antares, a transport ship that while investigating the planet Phasis, discovered Charlie Evans, a young man and sole survivor of a ship crash who lived on the planet alone for almost 15 years. Charlie's transferred to the Enterprise, which is en route to a nearby human colony. Kirk offers to entertain the crew of the Antares, but they decline, appearing eager to depart. Charlie's awkward but excitable, repeatedly interrupting Kirk and the Antares crew, prompting Kirk to softly admonish the boy. Charlie then meets Yeoman Janice Rand, who has arrived to escort him to his quarters. Charlie is instantly smitten with Rand, the first female he has ever encountered, much to Kirk's amusement. Charlie X represents a number of firsts for Star Trek. With its events unfolding entirely on the Enterprise, it's the first bottle episode of the show. The episode also marks the first output from famed Trek veteran DC Fontana, who expanded on Gene Roddenberry's one-sentence pitch, the first in the Trek creator's long-running fascinations with child prodigies and gods. Of course, Roddenberry still received a story credit, despite Fontana doing much of the work. As cold opens go, Charlie X is rather straightforward, comprising of only a single scene. One thing that stood out, aside from Charlie's facial expressions, was the direction and editing, which is pretty atrocious throughout, with garbled shot progression, choppy edits, awkward movement from actors, and continuity that is, well, non-existent. Luckily, the episode is strong enough to compensate for the episode's visual dog's dinner, but viewers used to the slicker production of Trek to come might find this a less palatable watch. Charlie gets to know his new surroundings, observing the crew as they perform various tasks throughout the ship. Charlie gifts Rand some perfume, which puzzles the yeoman as it's her favourite but wasn't in the ship's stores. Charlie then slaps Rand's backside, mimicking something he'd seen two crewmates do earlier, but Rand is shocked by the inappropriate gesture. Later, Charlie joins the crew, including Spock, Uhura and Rand, in the recreation room. Hoping to impress Rand, Charlie struggles to get her attention and uses powers to silence Uhura and Spock, who are performing. Now with undivided attention, Charlie amuses Rand and the crew with some unlikely card tricks. In the corridor, Charlie interrupts Kirk, who's in the process of ordering the ship's chef to make their synthetic meatloaf look more like turkey for Thanksgiving. Charlie explains his earlier encounter with Rand, but Kirk struggles to properly advise the boy before being interrupted by Uhura, who reports the Antares is attempting to make contact. On the bridge, Kirk speaks with the Antares, whose captain attempts to warn him of something, but the transmission abruptly ends. Charlie makes a strange comment about the Antares as Spock detects debris and confirms the ship's destruction. The ship's chef then contacts Kirk, reporting the synthetic meatloaf has been replaced with real turkeys. Charlie laughs at this before leaving the bridge, leaving Kirk confused and suspicious. It's odd that only the second proper episode of Star Trek would focus so heavily on an outside character. The decision to air Charlie X second wasn't a narrative decision, but rather one of convenience by the studio, who were able to turn the episode around more quickly due to it not needing any new special effects. I remain conflicted by the show's airing of its initial episodes. Chronologically, it's a complete mess. But the more I think about this episode and its focus on a young man meeting a new crew, the more it kind of makes sense as an early episode. A large part of what makes it work is the performance of Robert Walker, who despite being in his mid-20s at the time, really sold the teenage Charlie both in appearance and the tortured and angsty behaviour stereotypical of male adolescence. Walker, a known method actor, enhanced his performance by intentionally isolating himself from the cast and crew, something which clearly goes a long way in creating divide and alienation on screen, setting in motion the escalating conflict at the centre of the story. Over-the-top facial expressions aside, Walker's performance as Charlie is critical to the success of the episode, and I really couldn't imagine anyone else making it work. Finally, and a quick fun fact, the voice of the ship's chef was actually Gene Roddenberry's, the only Trek appearance of any kind by the show's creator. Chefs in Star Trek are actually seldom seen, and this could have led to the in-joke we would get years later in the prequel show Enterprise, and that show's unfortunate finale. In the recreation room, Kirk and Spock play four-dimensional chess. Spock suggests Charlie may know more about the destruction of the Antares, but Kirk dismisses Spock's concerns. Charlie then joins them and asks to play. Kirk leaves Charlie with Spock, who quickly defeats him and leaves when Charlie contests the result. Frustrated, Charlie uses his powers to melt pieces of the chessboard. In the corridor, Charlie encounters Rand, who introduces him to a younger yeoman who Charlie rudely dismisses, telling Rand he only has feelings for her and no other woman on the ship. Rand confides in Kirk, apprising him of her latest encounter with Charlie. Rand asks the bemused captain to intervene, which he later does, telling Charlie there are a million things you can have and a million things you can't, and that Rand isn't the girl for him. Kirk begins to take a more active role with Charlie, inviting him to the ship's gymnasium. There the two spar, and Kirk easily bests Charlie, much to a crewman's amusement. Charlie demands the crewman stop laughing at him and uses his powers, causing the crewman to vanish. Witnessing Charlie's powers, Kirk summons security to escort the boy to his quarters, but Charlie refuses, using his powers to disarm the arriving security officers. Not intimidated by Charlie's seemingly immense power, Kirk orders Charlie to his quarters, threatening to carry him there himself if he doesn't comply, which he does after a tense standoff. The Shatner Light, I'm not sure of its actual name, so I'm just going to keep calling it that, makes its first appearance in this episode, and boy is it used a lot. About 80% of this episode's close-up shots make use of this lighting technique, which accentuates the eyes for dramatic effect, and it works on a couple of occasions here, most notably in the gymnasium, with the shot adding nicely to Charlie's creepy and otherworldly threat. Other instances, mostly featuring Shatner, aren't nearly as effective, but I don't think they took the hint, as the effect is littered throughout the original series to the point of parody. When he's not bathing himself in weird letterbox light, Shatner actually delivers a decent performance here, with Kirk, initially a reluctant and awkward mentor, rising to duty and protection as Charlie becomes increasingly problematic, a quietly effective arc for the character. Kirk, Spock and McCoy discuss Charlie, who they suspect may be a Thasian due to his supernatural abilities. Kirk considers Charlie dangerous due to these powers and his adolescence, concluding he can't be taken to the human colony. Charlie then arrives and Kirk questions him about the destruction of the Antares, which Charlie admits to causing, justifying his actions by pointing to the aging ship, as well as the crew who he says were unkind to him. What about us? Kirk asks Charlie, who replies he doesn't know, leaving Kirk and the crew in the hands of the dangerous and volatile adolescent. On the bridge, Kirk orders the Enterprise on a course away from the human colony, but Charlie prevents this, taking control of navigation and communications, and then Spock, who Charlie controls just for fun. Kirk stands up to Charlie, who backs down and leaves the bridge, turning the young yeoman from earlier into an iguana in a fit of rage. Charlie then visits Rand's quarters and declares his love for her. Rand tells Charlie never to enter her quarters uninvited again, but Charlie is unapologetic and moves in on the yeoman, telling her he wants her. Another crucial component of Charlie X is the performance of Grace Lee Whitney, who nailed her performance as a conflicted yeoman Rand. Only a couple of episodes in, and Star Trek clearly had grand designs for Whitney, who at this point was a supporting character almost to the same level as Dr. McCoy. It's unfortunate then that the show mostly utilised her merely as eye fodder, featuring her in numerous scenes where men forced themselves upon her. It's all a bit uncomfortable, and considering her widely publicised alleged off-camera treatment and exit from the show, highly unfortunate. Truthfully, she deserved much better, and this episode is a testament to her potential, which was sadly squandered by the show. Rand calls to the bridge for help, and Kirk and Spock race to her quarters, but are immediately neutralised by Charlie, who makes Rand go away. Charlie tells Kirk he needs the captain as he can't run the Enterprise on his own, threatening to make more members of the crew disappear if he doesn't comply. Charlie then goes on a rampage, using his immense powers to freeze, rapidly age, and fuse shut the faces of any crew members that he doesn't like. With the ship now under his control, Charlie once again sets a course for the human colony, but leaves the bridge in a panic when Uhura reports a ship-to-ship transmission from an unknown source she is unable to hear. Realizing Charlie hasn't made anyone vanish since taking over the ship, Kirk theorizes that his powers may be stretched. With Charlie back on the bridge, the crew activate every system as Kirk confronts the boy, but the two are interrupted by something off the starboard bow, a formless vessel Uhura confirms as Thasian. A Thasian then forms on the bridge, lamenting Charlie's escape from them and the destruction of the Antares. The Thasian returns Rand, as well as other vanished crew, to the ship. Charlie is terrified, begging Kirk for help, wanting to be a part of human society. The Thasian tells Kirk Charlie will use his powers only to destroy and offers to take him back. Kirk is silent as Charlie continues to plead to stay, but it's to no avail as the Thasians remove him from the bridge. Upset by her ordeal and the events, a tearful Rand approaches Kirk, who assures the yeoman it's all over now as the Thasians and Charlie depart. While the episode was able to wrap up with its tragic themes intact, the ending did come as rather abrupt and a little convenient, with the Thasians turning up at just the right time, magicking everything back and taking Charlie away in a very clean manner. Personally, I would have had the Thasians message Uhura sooner, a small tweak that would have likely resulted in Charlie's actions and the escalating conflict feeling a little more organic. As for Charlie, while I found his fate satisfying, there is a very Trekkian feeling of sadness that lingers following the show's conclusion. Charlie is, despite everything, still one of us, and to see Kirk attempt, albeit perhaps a little half-heartedly, to save him from a life of isolation plays to the show's humanistic ideals, something that has always made Star Trek so appealing. Despite some janky editing, awkward moments, and an abrupt ending, Charlie X remains effective with its story and themes. A tragic and cautionary tale of exactly what not to do if you're an all-powerful being with social issues and a crush. Because we can all relate to that, right? The episode also affords excellent character development for Kirk and Rand, while also introducing early signs of inter-crew dynamics such as McCoy and Spock's legendary banter, as well as the origins of the show's identity as the thinking viewer's sci-fi. It's no wonder Deep Space Nine's Ira Steven Behr regards this as the episode that got him onto Star Trek, and I'd wager there are many others who also feel the same way. I'm giving Charlie X 3.5 stars out of 5. But what did you think of this episode? Did you love it? Did you hate it? How would you rate it? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more Star Trek reviews, recaps, lore theories and more coming soon. Until next time, I'm the Trek Lad. Live long and prosper.